Hi there, I'm Anirban Sen. Welcome to another episode of M&A Stories. As some of you who are involved in the M&A space are very aware of the problems integrations go through, but at the same time, largely many of the people who are involved in the space of M&A and strategy remain unaware or they underrate the importance of M&A integration. That is the topic that we're going to speak about today. And our guest is Pirita Näkkäläjärvi. And of course, we've been joined by Marcella Hall, who, as you know, is M&A employee experience expert, and she's joining us all the way from the US. So welcome, Marcella, first, and then I would also like to welcome Pirita.
With a warm welcome, Anirban. And Pirita, it's fantastic to see you. It's been a couple of months since we last connected back in September during Anirban's amazing M&A integrations course that we were involved in together. So it's so great to see you, and just really want to know, what have you been up to since then? Hope you've been well since then.
Yeah, thanks, Marcella, and really nice to see both of you. I can't believe it's been over half a year since our course together. So it's almost like a reunion. Well, I've been extremely busy. I think we've all been extremely busy with deals, and perhaps unexpectedly so. Everyone was thinking that due to the corona, the market is going to slow down and so on. At least there's a lot of uncertainty, but it seems like we've been busier than ever, which is of course good. It's nice to do all sorts of deals. So I've been doing both M&A and also JVs.
Wow. Very good. And we actually are privileged to have you here, Pirita, as well. And first, but before that, what I want to tell you guys is that she lives in a part of the world which is very, very close to the North Pole. So it is probably as close as it can get. And Pirita is going to share that part of the story. So let's start with a quick introduction, Pirita.
Thank you, everyone. So my name is Pirita Näkkäläjärvi, and I'm from Inari in Finland, which is 330 kilometers above the Arctic Circle. So look it up, Inari, on your maps. Well, my work is usually in Helsinki, in the capital of Finland, but during the COVID-19 pandemic, I've been lucky to be able to work from here, from my home village. And before telling about my M&A experience, maybe worth mentioning that I belong to the indigenous people Sami, and Sami culture and languages are still a big part of my life, although I'm building a career in the Western world, so to speak. And in terms of M&A, I've been working along the whole M&A value chain, so to speak. I started my career in investment banking at Merrill Lynch in London, and then I've been doing M&A on the corporate side a couple of times in various Finnish companies. Also, I've been working as a consultant, doing strategy, doing deals advisory, and most recently, when I was a consultant, I worked on M&A integration specifically. And also maybe I'll mention also that I've been working in a company that was acquired, so I've also experienced that. So everything that I've been doing during my career has been more or less connected to deals.
Excellent. This is how global the world is today, isn't it? I mean, above the Arctic Circle, and you're so close to the North Pole, and yet you are involved in transactions which potentially could be halfway around the world. This is fascinating. Now, since both of you had met at one of my training, I would also bring in Marcella and ask you to do a quick introduction.
Sure thing. My name again is Marcella Hall, and I am focused on employee experience for acquisitions and integrations for a tech company. And I'm based here in the US, in Denver, Colorado, but just really, one, loved the course that you had, and two, really appreciate the opportunity to stay connected with folks around the globe, which was one thing that I think we all appreciated from the course, where we had representation from, I think it was like 12, 15 different cities, multiple continents. So really appreciate that opportunity and the opportunity here today.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. And even though this podcast is not about our course, our business, but it's the glue that's brought us together. It's the now, Pirita, going back to you, one of the things that I distinctly remember, which is when you were doing the course, that you did mention about, hey, I come from a deal side, more of the M&A side rather than integration. And before you did the course, you only had a limited view of what a side of integration entails. And that is essentially our topic today. Why do you think the M&A integration side of things are still so underrated across the globe?
Yeah, it's something that I've seen during my career. So at the beginning of my career, I worked at Nokia doing M&A deals. And now most recently, I've been working with PwC doing M&A integration. And I've seen a huge change there. So, and I don't know whether you agree, you can tell me afterwards, but at least in my experience, about 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, the focus in deal making was a lot in valuation, strategy, the strategic rationale, the negotiations, all that kind of glamorous stuff. And then I remember that when we were building the M&A case, integration was almost like there was just a one-page placeholder that you would put in the presentation. And it was also almost like something you just have to fill in, really not worrying too much about it during the transaction. And then only when you signed, you started planning that. But what I've seen during the last few years is that in deals that I've been working on, either as a consultant or now on the corporate side, I work for Helen, which is one of Finland's biggest energy companies. We start looking at integration earlier and earlier on in the deals, and I think there's a lot more appreciation about how important it is to look at integration and that the value of the deals is really in the integration, and you have to make sure that you're not wasting that value. So whereas earlier on integration was not considered very cool or important, I think there's more and more understanding that it's really essential, and also it's a really cool part of the deal making. And a lot of fun.
Definitely. So as you mentioned that, there was a time where it was almost like an afterthought, like one page, to check the box without a ton of robust thought and planning around it, but you've seen that shifting over time. So when you think back to when it seemed like integration was a bit of an afterthought, what sort of challenges have you seen or observed that companies and organizations have faced if they were in that scenario, if they were not planning upfront for all of this?
Yeah, there are a lot of issues that can come and can happen if you don't think integration early on, and they come in many shapes and forms. Well, first of all, value. A lot of value is destroyed if you don't capture the crucial and critical elements that you need to think about when structuring the whole deal and then starting to do the integration. So it might be that you pay a lot of money, especially in an auction. You might pay a lot of money for a company, but then if you haven't thought about how you want to integrate it or not to integrate it, you might keep it as a subsidiary and a very independent unit. Then you might lose a lot of value in terms of money. But also what I've seen during my career is that even if the acquisition is considered really good and successful in terms of the monetary value, there's a lot of disillusionment among the employees. And then what happens, you might end up losing a lot of key talent. They leave the company, the acquired company, after the closing of the deal or the signing of the deal, if they don't see that the deal makes sense. So well, M&A is really complicated, as we all know, and there's a lot to consider. So there's all of the kind of the monetary value, but there's also a human element that is really fascinating, I think.
Absolutely,
I
and
also
I
think-
think the way you kind of described it, and which is why we have jobs like employee experience, in the post-merger integration. I think that's such an important aspect that a lot of organizations fail to look at during the integration. Now, you talked about the value creation, and some of our listeners may not be so familiar with value creation or with the definition of value that we use. Would you care to cite some examples of what value should have been created and why it got destroyed in because people did not plan integrations properly?
Yeah, the classical way to analyze value in M&A is through synergies. And a lot of times, of course, you get a lot of synergies from the cost side because you're combining things, especially if you're integrating fully. There are overlapping roles or overlapping, for example, you might decide that you don't continue a certain brand. So there's a lot of savings that you can achieve through M&A. And all of that has to be done, line by line and looking through, kind of combing through a lot of details to really figure out where the savings could be and how much they are and how do you go about actually making those happen. So that's one thing. But then in most M&A deals, there's also synergies on the revenue side and kind of upside in terms of selling, cross-selling, utilizing the networks that you have, the product, and so on. Although what I've seen in deals is that, especially when you announce, you usually quote some synergies and the cost synergies, and you might not put a price tag to the revenue synergies because they're a lot more uncertain. And especially when you're doing the deal, it's harder to evaluate them at that stage. But those are probably the classical ways to analyze the synergies. And then one crucial thing is that when you have done all of that analysis and you have kind of gone through your list and you have made the calculations and you have the grand total of the synergies that you could expect, it's really important to then prioritize your integration planning and your integration plan according to those synergies. And I think that's one kind of a classical mistake that I've seen. And what I've heard from colleagues who work in M&A integration is that when you start doing the M&A integration, you start working through functions. So you look, what are we going to do with the marketing and sales people? What are we going to do with the finance? What are we going to do with IT and so on, without actually prioritizing things. So synergies can also work as a guide to guide you through what is important and what needs to be done now and what can be done a bit later, perhaps.
Yeah, I think the way that you explain is absolutely spot on, which is in the post-integration, it's like so functional, and if I were to compare and contrast the pre-deal, which is literally at a C-level, CEOs and CFOs and some other folks are involved when it comes to the post-merger integration, it's like give it down to the operations, cascade it to the middle management, and let them figure out what needs to happen. Now, when we look at an integration, why is it that people tend to take a very functional approach versus a holistic synergies view? Is it because it's easy? Is it because it's easy to measure, easy to manage? That's why we should give it to them, or is there more fundamental problem there?
Well, it's of course that they haven't come to your course, so they don't know how to do this. Seriously speaking, it is probably easy because most of the time, of course, the integration teams consist of people who come from the different functions, and it's quite natural for them as professionals in their own field to start looking at the case and start thinking, so what do we need to do in my area? So that's why it's really important that you have that kind of an overall view to the deal and someone who's thinking across the functions and kind of also identifying like what are the value drivers or what are the common threads in the deal that also have to be managed. But having said that, you also need to have the functional integration. So you have to have both kind of in a matrix. And what those overarching themes or topics are, it really depends on the deal. Sometimes there are a lot of them, and sometimes it's only a few key ones that you have to focus on.
I really like how you stressed the importance of prioritization across, and then also you started introducing a time-bound element of what can we achieve now versus what's later. So I think that's really great too, to serve as a guide so folks can really rally around what the priorities are across the entire integration, and almost have the timing right of like the roadmap of, we're going to achieve this by this date in time, and then this other priority is targeting this later date and time, so that everybody can really align around that. That seems like a really helpful approach.
Yeah, and I think Marcella, you raised a very, very good point here, which is around the prioritization. The challenge comes in is now you have dissolved the deals team and you've got the functional guys. The IT guy comes in and says, hey, you know what, my priority is getting systems aligned. The HR people come in and they say, my priority is this. How do you, and this is for both, I guess, how do you navigate through those minefields of decision making? Somebody must still needs to hold the torch.
Yeah, you're right. I think M&A integration is one of the toughest professions out there. And when thinking about M&A, of course, doing the valuation, doing the negotiation, the structuring of the legal things, that's really complex. But when you start doing the M&A integration, there's a lot of stuff. You know how the Excel sheets are, the plans are. There's tons of things that have to be done. They just need to be done. But then there's also the human element. No matter how much you plan and anticipate, there's always a surprise around the corner, because you're dealing with people, and in deal situations, there's a lot of feelings as well. And you can try and anticipate what those are, but there are always surprises. So that's why I think it is really fascinating to work with M&A integration, because you're really working with the value of the deal, but you're also working with people. And this all gets very complex. And therefore, it's really important that there's someone who's really in charge of the integration, whether it's an integration manager, integration lead, or whatever, someone who is fully dedicated on that. You can't do M&A integration as a side job or kind of, an add-on to your day job. This is something that needs full dedication from someone. And you kind of internally, and when you start working together, the two companies that come together, you also kind of need a face of the deal, so that people know whom to call, whom to approach when they have questions and issues and so on.
I agree 100%, and just want to, underscore what Pirita was mentioning. I think that having a business sponsor for the integration can be extremely valuable, and that can be the ultimate decision maker. So when decisions need to be escalated, and having an escalation process itself, right? So there can be, an integration leader, representation from all of the functions, but still having that super senior executive who is the sponsor of the entire integration, I think can make it very helpful with respect to that prioritization. So they can serve as a guide when there are questions or competing priorities, and how are we going to decide which priority is number one and which is number two. I think that individual can ultimately be the accountable party for that. And then, as Pirita was mentioning, surprises popping up or unexpected things, there are uncertainties. And so as these things pop up and the group needs to reprioritize, I think that can just, can make it a really robust process in terms of always having that single individual who is the ultimate decision maker.
Yeah. These are absolute valid points, very, very good points. And what we also see is, one thing that supersedes everything else is what I call business as usual, right? So M&A is, even the Pirita, you've said M&A, we need dedicated resources. The reality is, apart from maybe the integration director and maybe one or two people, the rest of them have a day job, right? And not only that, they probably stretched in their day jobs, and then, hey, you know what? Here's an integration, right? And here's another integration that gets thrown in, and then there's a third one, and then soon you realized you are on the on the fourth, and then the fifth, and it goes on, right? And Marcella is laughing because yours is what, like fifth one that you're involved in or something like that.
Yeah.
So how does one go about managing or balancing it? Because I'm sure some of our listeners, some of our viewers would like to hear your sort of war chest stories, saying how do you balance, how do you go about balancing them in your day-to-day jobs?
Well, that's a difficult question. You're right. It is really an issue, especially for those guys who come from the functions and they have a million other things to do. And then here comes a deal, and the deal guys are like, this is the most important thing in the world. And for you, it might not be. You have other deadlines and other priorities. So it's really important in an organization that does M&A to kind of find a balance of building that internal capability to do M&A, and having that insight from your business, how you want to do it, and how you want to build the integration plan and so on. But it also makes sense to have external help. And it's really interesting for me because I've been working on both sides. I've been a banker, I've been a strategy consultant, I've been an M&A integration consultant, I've been on the corporate side. And it has really helped me to understand that you kind of need to work together with your internal guys, because they really know the business through and through, and they also know how we do things around here. But it often helps to get sparring from someone from outside. And I think some of the best consultants I've worked with, they dare to challenge you. They're not just there to kind of write down what you say and then package it nicely and make sure you have the board presentation ready or whatever. But I think the best consultants have been really challenging our thinking and have been asking the right questions so that it makes it is easier for us to make the right decisions.
Right. I think that's a very nice segue. And I know, Marcella, you wanted to say something, but I just couldn't help myself because Pirita now is moving to a consulting role. So that's why she's kind of nicely paving, praising the consultant side of things. And in fact, that's one of the questions as well. But let me have Marcella, you wanted to say something, and then I'll come to that question of consultants versus internal folks.
Yes, definitely. I just wanted to weigh in on, I think it really comes down to what is the organization's prioritization of M&A? Like, how important is M&A among the other competing priorities of the organization? And if it's not a top priority, and so the organization is anticipating an M&A here or there, it can certainly make sense to have that be among the priorities of these resources, right? The different functions. And so, folks will have competing priorities on their plate, but it'll come down to a prioritization in terms of, how someone would get their work done and tackle everything on their plate. Versus, I think the other situation is if an organization intends to be extremely acquisitive and maybe even looking at acquiring multiple organizations in a certain period of time and having multiple integrations at the same time, then I think they're much better equipped with having 100% dedicated to M&A roles across the functions. Because I think, if they're going to be going through many integrations at the same time, and each integration is going to be a little bit different, right? Depending on the deal, depending on the team, depending on, what's needed, right? What the milestones are and all that. So I think in order to tackle that, the organization will be better off having more roles that are 100% dedicated to M&A.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that we kind of discussed during our sessions as well, right? I mean, it's almost like you have two people on the deal side. You probably need, I'm saying 20, but may not be 20, but at least you need 10 to make it, to make integrations happen. I was just trying to sort of look for the name. I call it the world operates, right? I mean, there's so much of glamour that's thrown in on the M&A side, but hardly anything on the integration side. And the Dragon's Den, and what's that shark television series called? Not the loan shark, the other one. I forget. Where there is a team of investors sitting, and you come and propose your idea, and if your idea gets selected by one of the investors, they're like, "Ooh, that's the way it needs to be." But have you heard about any series on the integration side?
You're right. There should be series on the integration side as well.
Yeah, Marcella, you wanted to say something, right?
No, I agree. There should be.
Right. Yeah. So, and I think we can probably go on for hours on this one. Pirita, coming back to the integration and the importance, right? We were talking about external consultants versus internal resources. A lot of the people that end up talking on M&A integration, I mean, there is this belief, there is this overconfidence that, hey, I've got enough resources in my organization to pull it through. And the reality is, every integration that I've seen struggles with resources, right? And this comes down to priorities, this comes down to business as usual, competing projects, other competing projects, global projects, right? How much of it is real versus how much of it is to be made out, right? I mean, in the sense, people say, oh, we can do it, but in reality you need to have external resources or surge resources or augmented resources versus M&A is simple enough that we can manage it with internal resources, right? What's your take?
Well, I think there's always the element of surprise and also the human element in M&A integration, which makes it so complex. And also a lot of communication is needed, even if it is done just with purely internal resources, even if you didn't have any external advisors on board. But especially when things start moving and you are, for example, on day one and you're doing the first 100 days, there are so many moving pieces that you just simply need all the hands and all the resources you can get. And unless you are really a big company and a serial acquirer, you usually don't have those dedicated M&A people. In many companies, though, I've seen that a lot of people have M&A experience, perhaps from their previous jobs, or they've been working as consultants or whatever it is. But there are always other priorities as well. And in M&A, you have to, and in M&A integration, you have to do things systematically, and you have to be doing things all the time to keep the ball moving. But then we all know that in kind of the day-to-day job, you have other projects as well. You can't just put everything aside to focus on the deal. So I think that is a huge issue, and that's why most of the time you also need external help, just in terms of resources, but then also in terms of thinking and kind of thinking through your alternatives and really challenging your thinking. And that's what I found really fascinating now that I've been on the corporate side after a long stint in consulting. You kind of also look at the consulting job from a very different perspective now that you're on the client side, and you kind of realize, what the value of consultants can be to the client.
Absolutely. And, Marcella, do you have any thoughts on that one?
I agree. And I've been in both scenarios as well. So worked in consulting for a number of years and then now working in a corporate environment. And yeah, I think it is great to engage, just from a sheer magnitude perspective of what you need to achieve. And then also definitely appreciating that some consultants have just vast experiences working with so many different organizations out there that they may be thinking of something that might not necessarily have been on your radar. To Pirita's point about, challenging, having that healthy dialogue and discussion, helping you to think of something in a different way.
Right, absolutely. And so Pirita, looking at the M&A integration, suppose, and actually it's pretty aptly placed, right? Since you're moving into the consulting world, imagine that, I am, or Marcella is a client, right? What are the top 4 or 5 things that you're going to advise her or me, saying, have you considered this? If not, then you guys need to go back to the drawing board on integration. What would be those top 4 or 5 things?
Yeah, that's a really tough question and good question. So obviously you need to know why you're doing the deal. You have to be really crystal clear on what is it that we are trying to do here. Why is it that we're buying this company or selling, for that matter, or we're coming together as a JV? And that has to be clear to everyone. And unless you understand that, then it doesn't make sense to start doing anything. And then you also need to understand what the key value drivers are, because they're really like a red thread running through the whole deal and through the whole process. So you should be focusing on those value drivers all along the deal, whether it's in the very early phases through during due diligence or through integration planning and the integration itself. And those value drivers should also help you to prioritize what you should be doing and so on. But one interesting thing that I've learned now that I've been on the corporate side and I've been working with consultants, and I've realized something I haven't really realized earlier, and what I will take with me when I join EY Parthenon in the autumn is that you also, as a consultant, you also need to understand the way that the company management think and really the culture. What is our way of doing things here? Is there a really straightforward process which you follow, and or do decisions require a lot of discussions with a lot of informal networks and a lot of stakeholders inside the company? And is it that we need sparring? Is it that we want you to challenge, or is it that we just need you there as extra pair of hands and focus on the valuation or focus on this or that? And I think that's really important, and it really comes down to kind of client centricity, and it's a bit of a cliche, everybody's talking about it, but the fact is that you can't sell the same service for everyone. You really have to understand the situation that the company is in. Why are they doing the deal? How do they want to integrate? What makes sense in their way of working and so on? And that's quite fascinating, I find.
I love that you mentioned culture and ways of working and how the organization makes decisions, right? Is it straightforward, or do you need to consult with a wide audience in order to align on a decision? And I just think that's fantastic to call out, because that can often be overlooked or missed, and that really is a critical piece of how the organization works, how the organization can work with consultants, and then also how the organization can think about the company that it will be acquiring, right? So how does the company that will be acquired, how do they make decisions? What's really important and evident in their culture? So I think that's just such a great call out, Pirita.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned culture, people might think that culture is kind of fluffy, soft stuff. But in reality, you can think about culture, for example, through risk. And the approach to risk and the attitude to risk tells a lot about the culture of the company. And nobody thinks that risk management or risk analysis is soft and fluffy. But there are huge differences between companies. Some are really careful. They want to take time. They want to consider. They want to analyze all of the risks there. And some want to just move aggressively and grab the opportunity. And especially if you're in a situation that the approach to risk and the cultures are that different between the company that is acquiring and the one that is being acquired, then you're probably in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, you probably need to your point, understand those differences and then determine, okay, what is the approach forward? Are we the organization who is acquiring going to ask the acquired organization to make a big shift, and what does that look like? Or is there some way that we can meet in the middle, and what does that look like? So yeah, I think fascinating. We can have a whole nother another dialogue and discussion on this topic, because I think it's so important, and it's just it's not always discussed. It's not always front and center, but this can have a huge impact on, you know, how things get done, how quickly things get done, how quickly folks can align and move forward.
In fact, I would probably put it the other way around. It is majority of the times culture does not get discussed, or even if it gets discussed, it never gets to see the light of the day when it comes to granularity and the details. As you pointed out, Pirita, it's like people think it's fluff, but it is about management system. You know, it is the way management is exercised through the organization. It is the way people interact with each other. One of the things I would like to sort of go back to, which is about consultants and coming in my experience, the piece that I see missing is often what I call immersion. You know, getting, if you as a consultant are coming to a client, immersing yourself into that client environment, understanding, you know, whether it's an empathy or some of the rationale, it almost is very clinical in approach, right? Here's the template, here's the framework, bam, 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 you go in, right? Whereas immersion is pretty much not there. You know, it's not there between consultants and clients. It's not there between acquirers um, and the company that is being acquired or the target. So it is something I think we probably need to start some sort of a movement and make sure that the empathy part, the immersion part, does happen. Now, as Marcella mentioned, you know, we could go endlessly on this one. Coming back, you know, last couple of questions. Looking into the future, what are some of the changes that you foresee or some of the trends, and especially because we're kind of in a COVID environment and, you know, over the next course of next year or so, a lot of it is going to open up. What's your take?
What I see happening, one thing is that the deal teams and the M&A integration teams are being merged. So we're moving to a model where you don't have two separate teams anymore, but there is one team that is working together from the beginning of the deal. Obviously, you know, at the beginning, the team is often smaller, but what I see happening is that you tend to bring in those people who start thinking about integration early on, or there is someone in the deal team who understands that we need to start thinking about this and start making the integration plans, not just having that one placeholder, one box on a page where you put a couple of bullet points, but really starting to think about it and then structure the whole deal and plan the whole transaction around the key principles for integration. That's one thing that I'm seeing more and more. Then second really interesting development that I've been following, but I can't say that I'm an expert on this, but I'm trying to learn as well, is all sorts of agile methods and processes, and there's a lot of really interesting kind of process development around not only M&A but also M&A integration, and I think we're going to see a lot of development and a lot of new things there, and probably also kind of the digital leap that we've been experiencing through the COVID-19 pandemic is going to help us. So working is going to be a lot more flexible, and we are going to be using a lot more digital tools, and that's also probably going to happen a lot more in M&A, and I think that's just a good thing. I'm all for communications and making it easier for people to get the information they need to do the deal. Obviously, you have to keep confidentiality. You know, M&A deals are often quite secret, but within the team, it's really important that information flows. My other career is in communications. I've been working in media and communications every now and then, and that's also one of my passions, to make sure that people have enough information inside the team to make really good decisions, and also to bring up their ideas. The more they understand what we're doing, the more they can think ahead and bring those ideas to the integration lead or to the integration manager.
I love that.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very nice way of putting it. We definitely see a lot of the trends happening in the world, especially people are preparing for the post-COVID situation, and digital part absolutely is going to play a lot of they play a very important role. And that kind of brings me to the last question, or actually second last, which is, would you want to share some practical tips for people who want to pursue their career? I mean, imagine Marcella 5 years back, maybe 10, when she's
15 years back.
15 years back. Any tips who wants to start their career in this space?
Wow, that's a really tough question. Well, I guess my advice is to, just seize the moment, and every time you have an opportunity to work on something that quite may seem quite daunting at first and scary, just go and do it, because you can learn a lot from it. And that's what I've been doing the last 1.5 years, working in the energy sector. It's a whole new field for me, but it's been an amazing learning opportunity that I will take with me when I move forward. So that's one thing. You should always take on the challenges. Don't be afraid of anything new, because that's going to carry you forward. And then if you think about M&A integration specifically, I think that's my opinion, at least, that generalists are quite good at this. So if you want to do M&A integration later on in your career, you don't have to start there. But it makes sense to get experience from different sides or from different functions, or work a bit on strategy, finance, and so on, and kind of build your toolbox. Because when you come to lead an M&A integration, you really need to understand a lot of things, and you need to be able to, think in terms of, numbers, and you need to understand, the models and so on. But you also need to have that human side. So that's what makes M&A integration so special, that you can really use all of those skills. So it makes sense to get experience from all sorts of things.
Very good. And I know Marcella has 10 more questions, but it's probably time to get one or two questions from her.
Yeah, we can. I think we've covered all of my questions. I think we can have a whole another discussion on all of the cultural topics. So I was actually going to ask Pirita if you wouldn't mind sharing your contact information. If listeners want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you? Email, LinkedIn, another source, just so folks can know.
You can find me on most social media platforms, not on TikTok. I'm not going to do any dance videos, so please don't go there. But you can find me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, and I'm online most of the time. So if you drop me a line, I'll answer right away. So looking forward to continuing the discussions on any of the platforms, and hopefully also seeing all of you somewhere, sometime in the future. So looking forward to your comments or your questions.
Absolutely. I think this has been fascinating. By the way, there are two more platforms that I have started using. One is Clubhouse. And I think, Marcella was the one who kind of introduced me. And after that, I've never seen her on Clubhouse, right? She just completely disappeared. I think, Pirita, you recently joined Clubhouse, right?
Yeah, about a month ago. And I've done one discussion in Clubhouse, and that was fascinating. But I switched all the notifications off, because there were tons of them coming through all the time. So that's why I never remembered to go there. But you're right, it's an interesting space, and I hope there are more and more M&A and M&A integration groups there as well. So a nice way to share stories as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I do have a session that I've started. It's called Future Enabled Organization. It's slightly broader, because the thing with M&A and M&A integration is majority of the people are not fun-loving people like us, right? I mean, they tend to be very serious ex-bankers or bankers, and
I know some fun-loving. I have many colleagues, past and present, who are fun-loving.
Oh yeah, of course,
Yeah,
of course they are.
So we'll bring them into the fold.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but this has been a real pleasure, I must say, Pirita, and also Marcella. I think we've been doing this for the last few episodes. Pirita, Marcella, and I, we've done some of these, but we are evolving as well. And I think what people enjoy is the banter, is the informalness about the channel here. So, I think because you both know each other, it made this particular podcast, I'm sure, will be a real pleasure for our listeners. So, thank you so much, Pirita, for joining us today.
Thank you. And it's really amazing to think that we met on your course and now we're keeping in touch. And it just shows how you can really widen your network and get to know really interesting people and professionals around the world by just joining one course, and how that can carry forward and really bring happiness and new perspectives to your career as well. So this was fun, and thanks for the invitation. An honor.
I just wanted to say thank you so much, Pirita. It's so great to see you. It's great to connect. It was great to have this discussion. Looking forward to the next time as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Excellent.
Thank you.
With that, we bring close to the session today. So if you actually liked the session today, then don't forget to hit the like button, but also subscribe to our channel with the details given below. It would be awesome to have more of you subscribe to our channel, and we would love to bring more M&A stories like this, the ones Pirita shared today, or even Marcella, for that matter, shared some of her stories. This is an awesome journey, and I want you to be part of it. So again, don't forget to subscribe and like this episode today. Thank you so much, and see you next time. Bye-bye.